Today I am chatting with Dan Alexander. He is a sports betting analyst, host, and producer. Dan, thank you for joining me.
Of course. Anytime I get to talk to fun folks about the Philadelphia Eagles, like I'm going to be there. You know what I mean? Just give me the time,
Let's do
give
it.
me the place. So I'm pumped, Katie. Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk Eagles. So the big news out of Philly this week, Brandon Graham has officially announced his retirement. I'm sure Eagles fans are feeling this one. He is the longest tenured Eagle in franchise history at 15 seasons. I don't know that team without him. Dan, how big of a loss is that for this team, not just on the field, but off?
Yeah, I mean, you always saw this coming. Like this whole Brandon Graham retirement thing has been a talk in the offseason for really the past few years. It was kind of him and
Yeah.
Jason Kelsey. Like, when are these guys going to leave? When are they going to be dumb? So it doesn't come as a surprise, but it does come with like a heavy heart. Like, if you're a Birds fan the past 15 seasons, like that's been your guy. But I mean, it's hard on his end to not be content with a career where, if you think about when he was drafted, where he was drafted, so much of his early career was, you shouldn't have been drafted over Earl Thomas. Look at how much safety help the Eagles need. Look at what they need in the secondary. They didn't need a pass rusher who's really just been a role player guy. And in the latter half of his career, he really emerged as not only a top flight talent on this team, but in the
Mhm.
league, just because of that longevity, that starting run that he went on. Sometimes your best ability can be availability. And that's the story of Brandon Graham's career. He always showed up, he was always ready to go. And when your career ends with two Super Bowls to your name, one of them you played with a torn bicep and re-tore your bicep in the final ride for you and continued playing, you get two of those championships to your name, and you also get to your name that you have the biggest sack in Philadelphia Eagles history against the greatest quarterback who ever played in Tom Brady. So not too bad there, and not too shabby for my man Brandon Graham. But as far as it is on the field for the Eagles, how does this impact this team, right? It's just another hole that you kind of need to fill. You often think about losing coordinators and coaches once you win a Super Bowl, but really this Eagles team looks completely different than they did last season when they won the Super
Yep.
Bowl, just as far as the pieces that are in place are. So I think you're going to miss him simply because of what he brings to the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see Brandon Graham around this Philadelphia Eagles team, be it in a coaching aspect, or even just a consultant like they've done with players like Connor Barwin, Brian Dawkins. But I would be
Mhm.
shocked if this was the last you saw of Brandon Graham around this Philadelphia Eagles team. But we will miss you, BG. That's for damn sure.
Dan, they lose a few key pieces from the Super Bowl winning team, especially on that defense. So one of the most notable I see is CJ Gardner Johnson, CJGJ. Who do they get to fill that spot beside Reed Blankenship?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Reed Blankenship because he's definitely kind of firmly put himself in as one of the key pieces of this defense, and something that they've definitely kind of been missing for sure. He was kind of a question mark coming into this season, or the Super Bowl winning season for sure. But game sealing interceptions that he was able to put together. That Reed is going to be one of that piece. Outside of that, what they have on the roster right now, Sidney Brown, Tristan McCullum, Lewis Sine, Andre Sam. Not to besmirch these guys, but they got 8 starts between the 4 of them, right? That's not a
Woof.
number that really inspires confidence, right, Katie? So you have to go out and do something. And you and I were talking about it before we came on air here. Kind of chatter about like a Justin Simmons type signing, or even add some more on the back end with like a Julian Blackmon, and then be able to move some players around. I think they have to do something in that line, right? Because finally, for the first time, you have cornerback shored up. You know what I mean? You
Mhm.
have a Kenyon Mitchell and a Cooper DeJean who look like to be bookend cornerbacks for the first time for the Eagles since, Sheldon Brown was playing. And you had Lito Shepherd across from him on the other side. So it has been quite some time that you feel really anchored at the cornerback position. But yeah, that safety is just as important because, as you mentioned with CJ Gardner Johnson, not just what he brought on the field, he kind of, like Brandon Graham, brought the tenor of that defense, right? Really smash mouth style. If you look at the 2
Right.
years that he was on the Eagles, both seasons they end up making the Super Bowl. The one that he wasn't, they lose to Baker Mayfield in the first round. So you're going to say, Dan, that's really a safety doing that? Maybe not, but in the one game that CJ Gardner Johnson had to leave the field this year was that game that they completely blew it. They were up 3 scores against Washington, and they end up having CJ Gardner Johnson ejected from the game because he got punched in the face. Clearly, I'm still not bitter about that at all, right? But he
Not at
ends up
all.
having, yeah, not at all, not at all. Completely fine. It's all good. Yeah, totally. But the thing is, he leaves that game and the wheels fell off of the defense. And you can say, oh, well, that happened. So, Jalen Hurts also left the game. Well, the big difference maker for me was the fact that the game winning touchdown for the Washington Commanders in that game was thrown to the exact spot on the field CJ Gardner would have been covering in a 3 high zone. So, I think I was a major guy to say we need to re-sign him. He and Zach Bond were my two. You need to bring these guys back. They did
Mhm.
it right with Zach Bond. I think clearly Howie Roseman, the edict came down. Let's get younger. Let's be the youngest roster in the league. And unfortunately, CJ Gardner Johnson was a casualty of that. And I don't think they wanted to pay what he was looking for. So it kind of seemed like it was a mutual deciding to move on. So in Howie Roseman, we trust, right, Eagles fans? You have to kind of think there is a method to that madness. And Howie Roseman's always down to make a splash. So I would be fine with the Justin Simmons. I think he would fit in well.
Mhm.
I think clearly there's major coordination going on between what players they're signing and who Vic Fangio is handpicking for this defense, which I think is ultra important. So whoever they bring in, I have confidence they've done their due diligence. If it's Justin Simmons, that would be great. He's shown athleticism. He's shown an ability to understand a system. And really in what Vic Fangio does, as long as you can play the system, you can become an all-star. I think you saw that across up and down the defense this year for sure with players who really didn't contribute anywhere else.